Hi, welcome to Quilting with Lori. My name is Lori Dickman, and today I'm going to be sharing with you how to create the Holly and Berries wall quilt. This is a free quilt pattern that you would have received this past Monday in my week 11 Scrappy Christmas block. I'll make sure that I link below the PDFs for the block itself, as well as the pattern and all of the templates that will all be below in the description box. In the tutorial last week, I taught you how to create or construct the Scrappy Christmas block, and you'll need to construct 8 of those for this wall quilt. And what I'm going to share with you today is how to applique the center block, the 4 corner blocks, as well as the 4 border blocks. So let's see how this is done. In the description box below, you're going to find the PDFs for all of the templates. The template for the center block is 2 pages. Make sure whenever you print PDFs, make sure that you print them at 100% so that they printed the exact size. So I printed those. I also printed the PDF for the corner blocks, and I also printed the PDF for the border blocks. And that's actually a total of 4 pages. In fact, you can actually see the whole thing on my tabletop. That is the template that will go in the borders. And there are lines on these templates, and you just follow those lines and tape the 4 sheets together once you've printed them out, which is what I have done here. As you can see, I've taped them together. And then I'm using a fusible web that I placed on top of this and traced it. Let me show you that. So the package of fusible web that I am using, it's a Pellon Wonder Under. It's a number 805. It's a very lightweight. You don't need anything heavy duty, just a very lightweight. You could use soft fuse. You could use light steamy seam too. There's so many different fusible webs that it's a paper-backed fusible web that you want to use. And this one was it came in a roll. It was quite long, and it allowed me to be able to roll it out on top of my taped template, and then I simply traced 4 of them. So you'll see here, and it's hard, I didn't trace these with a really dark marker, and I apologize for that. It's probably going to be hard for you to see these, but I have 4 different swags that I have traced onto this paper-backed Wonder Under. And then what I'm going to do is take this paper-backed interfacing and fuse it to the wrong side of my fabric. And let me grab that fabric so that you'll see what I'm going to fuse it to. This is the fabric that I'm going to use. It's a nice Christmassy fabric. It's a cream background with some gold sparkly prints and stars and so forth. And that's what I'm going to use to fuse my swag to. And so I'm on the wrong side. The wrong side of the fabric is facing me. The rough side of the interfacing, or the web I should call it, is facing the wrong side of the fabric, and I am going to fuse that to the back side of the wrong side of the fabric. And make sure that you laid it out so that you've got the length that you need, because this is about 40 inches long, and you need to make sure that your fabric is that long. Then you'll also want to take into consideration what your directions say. My Pellon Wonder Under indicates that I need to hold my dry iron for 5 to 8 seconds on each spot to make sure that it's secure. But make sure that you check the directions with whichever fusible interfacing that you plan to use, and follow those directions. I think my iron's not quite hot yet. We'll give it a few more minutes. I'll be right back. Okay, so my iron is now warm enough. I've just pressed this on, and I'm just holding it on for 5 to 8 seconds, and I'm going to continue doing this all the way down until the entire template of these large swags are secured, fused to the back or the wrong side of my cream colored fabric. So I'll do this and I'll be right back. Okay, so you'll notice I have one of the swags cut out. I cut it on the lines on the fusible paper-backed fuse and flip it over, and this is the right side. What I'll be doing to it when I adhere it to the fabric is just removing this last film here, this paper. Okay, so I grabbed a pin, and an easy way to remove the paper from the fused fabric is just to scratch a little line in there, cut into the paper, and that way you can just start removing the paper very easily, as you can see. So now the paper has been removed from this swag, and the adhesive is left there, and that is what we will adhere to the red borders. And I'll show you that here in just a few minutes. You'll notice that I did not cut out any of my templates. My templates remain intact on the paper in the PDF that you printed. That way you can use them for future use. You do not have to cut these out. You're simply going to use this as a guide. You're going to lay your fusible web on top of your paper and trace through it, trace all of the templates through it, as I have done. For instance, and again, I did use a light ink pen, and I'm sorry you probably can't see it as well, but these are all the leaves, B, D, C, E, H, etc. And so I have just traced them on my fusible web. I just laid it over top of the sheet and traced through. And that's what I did. So I have an element for everything that I need. Another thing that I did is I traced the elements close together on the fusible web so that I was conserving not only the fusible web, but also your fabric so that you can lay it onto the fabric in groupings. Let me show you what I mean by that. So here I've got all of these leaves all positioned closely together, and I'll be able to place them on the green fabric, the back of the green fabric for the holly leaves, and press it to that and then cut them out. And that helps to conserve not only the fusible but also the fabric. I've done the same with all of the other elements. In this case, I've got a lot of the little berries and the little stems here as well. So I've traced them all closely together on the fusible, and that way I can place them on the wrong side of the appropriate color fabric. Depends on what fabric colors you're planning to use. And then you can fuse them down, and then you can go ahead and cut them apart. So for these leaves here, I'm going to place them up in the corner, and I'm going to fuse these right on here. And then once I have fused them, I'm going to let them cool down, and then I will cut them apart. So move that aside. Let's take some of these berries. I'm going to put these on red fabric. And the red fabric I'm going to use are these here, so I might need to cut some of these apart so that they fit on the back. So this is the right side, but I'm putting them on the back of this fabric. And I want to try to conserve fuse as well as fabric. So there we go. These are all my berries that I need for all four corners as well as the center. And here's one last berry. I'm going to get rid of that excess. And then I'm going to grab a dark green and fuse these elements onto that. I'll grab that fabric. I'll be right back. Okay, so I went to my stash and I found a dark green, so I am going to press these little stems of the leaves, I guess, or veins. I guess they're veins in the leaves. That will be the dark. And then I have these small leaves that are going to be for the outer four corner blocks, and I'm going to tuck that right in there. And this is the back side of the fabric. That's the front side. I'm using a lot of greens, lots of scraps of greens and reds. I'm just using a ton of what I have. So it's a very scrappy quilt. All right, so all of these have been fused. The next step now is kind of tedious, but important. You'll go ahead and you'll cut out each and every one of the elements and have them ready to adhere to your backgrounds. And I would recommend using a pin, as I had showed you earlier. Just scratch across the paper, and that will help you get a hold of it so that you can actually remove the paper backing, and then all that's left is that adhesive. You can feel that sticky adhesive, and that's what will be used to adhere it to the front side of your block. So let me get all these cut out and I'll be right back. So the first block we're going to put together is the center block, the center part of the quilt, and that's the holly block. And there are 7 leaves, and you can make as many berries as you want. You don't have to follow this diagram. You can make more berries, you can make larger or smaller berries. That's totally up to you. This is your quilt, so have fun with it. So I have cut all of mine out. I have removed all of the paper, and I've kind of laid them out in an order based on this block here. And what I've also done is I've taken my 12.5-inch block, and you might want to cut it out at 13 inches square, and then you can trim it down to 12.5 after you're done appliquing. And then I simply folded it on itself twice, and I'm pressing creases on the block so that I have a guide. So those crease lines will be my guideline as I'm placing my elements on here. So I'm just simply going to start playing, checking the picture of the holly and placing my elements here. And I might be moving things around. We'll see how it goes here. I have a total of 7 berries. You could certainly make more, you could make less, you can make a bunch of tiny ones as well. You can make darker small berries that highlight these larger red berries. But I think I kind of like how I've got it here. I believe I'll go ahead and go with that. Once you're happy with the placement, you like where it is, then you can press it and fuse it. And once it's fused, then it's ready to go to the sewing machine, and you want to set your machine up for applique. I'm going to use a beautiful red embroidery and a beautiful green embroidery floss to embroider these on. And you can embroider them or applique them in any way that you like. You can applique just using a straight stitch. That's fine. This is fused, so there won't be any issue with it fraying. Or you can do a blanket stitch, or you can use a fancy stitch. Whatever your heart desires, just have fun with that. And you could accent some veins in here with a darker thread as well. There's so many things that you could do. Just have fun with it. So I'm going to go ahead and fuse this, and then I'll meet you over at the sewing machine for applique. So I've loaded my red embroidery thread in my machine, and I am simply going to use a straight stitch and stitch around the raw edge of each of these berries. So here are the berries. They've all been stitched down, and it's just a raw edge straight stitch. And I would recommend, if you have a knee lift when you're doing these berries, I would attach the knee lift to your machine. That way your hands are free, and you can much more easily get that presser foot up and down as you're working your way around each of these small circles. Before I change my embroidery thread from red to green and applique my leaves here, I'm going to get the 4 corner blocks prepared and get those leaves and berries adhered to the background squares, and that way I can go ahead and use my red thread while it's in my machine and applique those berries on those 4 corner squares first. So let's go over there and take care of that. 4 corner blocks. The background squares are 4.5 inches, and I've cut 4 of them. And I've cut out all of my leaves and my berries. And I did go ahead and fold the squares again in quarters, just so I had some guidelines there. And you can go ahead and place these berry leaves any way you'd like on there, but the pattern sort of calls for them kind of off to the side there. So that's sort of what I'm following here. So I'm putting my berries about like that, and my leaves there, and my berries here. And again, make sure that you use a pin if you're having a hard time getting the fusible off, and just scratch across the top of the paper, and that loosens it so that you can remove all of that paper very, very easily. So once you're happy with the placement, you want to maybe just study it and be pleased with the placement of each of the corners and how it's positioned. Then, and only then, will you steam it and press it down nicely. So I'm going to study these, make sure I'm happy with all of them, and then I'm going to steam press them down, and I'll meet you back at the sewing machine where I'll finish appliquing these berries onto these 4 corner blocks. I almost forgot about these tiny little veins that you can use to place on each of your leaves. The large block didn't actually call for those. When the EQ8 produced the pattern, it didn't have those in there. You can certainly add those on your own if you'd like, or if you don't even want to use these, you wouldn't have to. You could actually just applique a vein in there using a dark thread or a light thread, whatever you choose to do. This, again, it's your quilt. Have fun with it. And on these berries, you could applique tiny little dark circles on there, which would represent where the stem had been. So that's something else that you can do. There's so many options available for you. Just use your creativity and have fun. So I simply went ahead while I still had the red embroidery thread in my machine and embroidered the berries on these small blocks. It's just a simple straight stitch, and I just got as close to the edge as I could and simply went around each of the berries with a straight stitch, and simple as that. Now I'm going to put in my green thread and I'm going to applique the leaves. Okay, so I'm going to applique using green thread on the center block on the larger leaves, and I'm going to just create a stem by having a small zigzag down the center of this leaf, and the zigzag is 2.4 wide and 1.6 in the stitch length. So I'm just starting toward the end there, and I'm going to stitch down the center, which will just give the illusion of a vein, excuse me. Then I'm going to turn it to a straight stitch, and I'm going to follow this berry around, and then I'm just going to simply do a straight stitch close to the edge all the way around. And if you have a knee lift, that definitely does help. It frees up your hands as you're appliquing around. And I won't make you watch this whole thing. That's kind of boring, but that's what I have done here, giving the illusion of a vein down the center of the leaf, and then I'm going to do a straight stitch all the way around the outside edges. For the corner blocks, I simply used a straight stitch around the berries using red applique thread, embroidery thread, and then for the holly leaves themselves, I did a straight stitch down the center of that vein, excuse me, there, and then I just did a straight stitch all the way around the leaves. And that's all that I did for the little corner blocks. Just used straight stitches all the way around. All right, so this block has been appliqued. I've finished all of the applique on this block. And now I'm going to grab my borders and the swags and get those appliqued. Okay, so what we're going to do now is get the swag appliqued, or actually pressed, fused to the border itself. And you kind of see on the key on your template where that's going to be located. And here's what I did. I found the center of my swag and I made a crease in that. I found the exact center of my rectangle border, and the instructions indicate you should cut widths of strip that are 4.5 inches wide by 40.5 inches long. And then when you open this up, you have the crease there, which you're going to match with this crease here. And you're going to allow that to lay nicely. It's going to kind of come down to the corner of your block there. I want to make sure it's on the screen and you can see that. And once you're happy with its position, if it looks even on both sides, then you might want to pin it as you kind of study this and make sure that you have it where you want it. Then once you're happy with the position, then you can go ahead and steam it to secure this to your border. Again, this has been fused. The swag has been fused, so this is the sticky side and this is the right side, the fabric here. So get those fused on all 4 of your borders. Then we're going to take these borders to the sewing machine and we're going to applique the edges of these as well. I am now appliquing the swag to the borders, and I've got red borders and a white swag. You can use obviously any colors you choose to. I am appliquing the swags with a small zigzag. So my zigzag is 2.4 wide and 1.4 in length. And I'm just keeping the one edge, the right edge of the needle, so that it does cover the actual edge of this swag. I certainly could have done this in a straight stitch, but I wanted a little bit more of the gold thread on the edges of that, so I chose to use a small zigzag. Down here at this point, I'm able to just zigzag over the top of that entire edge, and it will keep it secure. Then I'm going to flip it around and just come right back over that same stitching, and it will be nice and secure. And I'll continue to do this for all 4 of my swags. And I'll do that and I'll be right back. Okay, so I have finished appliquing the swags onto each one of the borders. And so 2 of the borders just have the swags only appliqued onto them. And then 2 of the borders, I have taken the appliqued corner squares and attached them to both ends. And make sure that they circle around in this direction. This will be the bottom or the top, and then the other one will be the reverse. So I have the applique done for the center block as well as those corner blocks and the borders. So all the applique is finished. Now what I need to do is put the center of the quilt together. And I have already finished piecing all 8 of my scrappy Christmas blocks. So they are all finished. And I've also pieced together 4 rows of the sashing. So I've got 4 of those, all complete with the 12.5 inch green strips and the 1.5 inch cornerstones. I've got those ready to go. And I have a top row and a bottom row of these scrappy blocks put together with those 12.5 inch by 1.5 inch sashings. So the top and the bottom row are ready to go. Now I need to do that center row, which includes the applique block and 2 of these scrappy blocks. So I have already attached the sashing to the outsides of the blocks, to the insides, and then this block, the applique block, will go in the center here. So I'll go sew that together, and then I'll have all 3 of my pieced rows together, and then I will start putting the center of the quilt together, starting with a sashing cornerstone row, then the first row of scrappy blocks. The second row will be this row. I'll make sure that each of these rows is separated using these beautiful sashings with the cornerstones. So I'll go do that, and I'll get that up on the wall so that you can see what that looks like. So I do have the center of the quilt pieced together. I do have it pinned to another quilt that's behind it here. So you're seeing a border that belongs to another quilt. But the center is pieced. I attached the sashing rows. So there's 4 sashing rows with cornerstones, and then 3 rows of blocks with sashing in between each of the blocks. And then of course also on the end. So the entire center of the quilt is encased with the sashing. The next thing that I'm going to do is attach my 2 side borders to each side of the quilt. And you'll want to make sure when you sew them to the sides of the quilt that you sew them so that they're facing the right direction. So make sure that you sew them to each side like this, and these 2 borders do not have the corners on them. Once I have these 2 sewn on each side, then I will sew the top and the bottom. And again, you'll want to make sure that you sew them on in such a way that the swag all is in the same direction. And you want to take a look at your pattern, and it will show you just exactly how that swag is to look on there. So once I have all 4 of these borders on my quilt, then I will put on the outside borders, which is another green. So this is a real scrappy quilt. I have just used just about every red and green that I own is in this quilt, and I think it's going to turn out just beautiful. So let me get those borders on, and I've got the instructions that tell you what size 1.5 inch outside border strips you need to cut to attach to your quilt as well. So here is the finished quilt. I've got the borders on and the outside borders, and I absolutely love it. It is just great. I can't wait to get it quilted. It was really a fun quilt to put together. Very easy. It really went together quickly this afternoon. So I hope that you're all going to try it, and I'd love to see photos. So make sure that you contact me through my website. I'd love to see photos of your Christmas quilt. So again, I'll be sure to attach the PDF, which includes the pattern for the scrappy blocks, and there are 8 scrappy Christmas blocks that were needed for this quilt, as well as the pattern for the quilt itself. And all of the templates, you'll have all of those PDFs that you need attached in the description box below. So make sure you grab those, and when you print them, make sure you print those PDF templates at 100% so that they fit properly. And if you do have any questions or comments, I'd love to hear from my viewers, so please don't hesitate to comment below. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you so much for joining me as I've shared with you the Holly and Berries quilt pattern. I hope many of you make it, and I look forward to hearing from you. Have a great weekend and happy quilting.